So we're good to go. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this session today, this discussion. So for those who don't know me, my name is Matt Smead. I, alongside my colleague Alethea, we run the Working Well community, and this is one of our try to be monthly discussions, panel discussions that we have, which we call Talking Workplace Wellbeing. So we do it on a whole host of different subjects. And today's subject is all about inclusive leadership. And we've got two amazing panelists with us today. So I'll quickly introduce them. So first up, we've got Sarah Burrell. So Sarah is a highly experienced inclusion consultant, specializing in strategic and cultural transformation. You've got a focus on solution-based systemic change, and you work in collaboration with clients to embed and align inclusive frameworks with unique organizational needs and business objectives. That sounds incredibly impressive. So
I try.
And also, some of you may recognize Sarah because she was part of our Working Well conference that we ran earlier in the year. And then we're also joined with by Suzanne, Susie, what would you prefer?
Either, but Susie's normally what people call me.
Cool, we'll go Susie. So Susie Thompson from Leicester City Council. So Susie is an experienced organisational development consultant with over 20 years experience gained as a consultant, internal practitioner, business partner and coach. A large part of your career has been spent in the retail sector, although you started out in social care, and now you're an internal OD consultant with Leicester City Council, which is where we know each other from because we work on an inclusive leadership programme. So great to have you both here today. So like I say, we're going to talk all things inclusive leadership, which might get a little bit more inclusion more broadly, I would have thought, as the discussion goes on. But I'm going to ask you just to kick us off really by defining some of these terms. So what the heck does inclusive leadership even mean? Who wants to start? Susie?
Okay, I'll go if you like. For me, inclusive leadership, it just means about listening and being curious and involving people to make decisions. And I think that's as simple as it is. If I distilled it down, I don't particularly think that inclusive leadership is a leadership model as such. I guess the way we approach it at Leicester City Council is that it underpins all of our behaviours, all of our leadership qualities. You know, you'll see it and hear it in our values. And so, yeah, we haven't got a inclusive leadership competency all of its own. I don't know, what do you think, Sarah?
I think the main thing about it is it's context driven. And when we it's more of a reminder about how we approach, how we engage with people and the people who we want to get something out of, and how we do that is so important. And it's just it's a reminder of what we need to do in order to get the best out of people, and knowing we are being aware and conscious of the differences in people, the strengths, the qualities, and different and values and respect needed to embrace difference and see everyone flourish and grow. And I think that's a very flowery interpretation, but it's important. And yeah, it's not a solid 1, 2, 3 model. It's a very contextual and fluid dynamic model. We all have to encounter at some point, I think. That's my little addition there.
I think I keep thinking about the climate crisis in relation to inclusion. And I think one thing that sparked me off with this was hearing in the news something that Nicola Sturgeon had said at the actual conference. I think it was towards the end, how there was a minority of female leaders, and how she thought, or she thinks, that if there were more female leaders present, different decisions will be made and we will be better off. I mean, that's just taking it from the news. Obviously, she'll have said it in much better words than I could. But it has made me, start to think about the power of inclusion. And actually, it's a choice. Leaders have to make a choice, and they have to, follow through with getting people from and creating the space for voices to be part of the decision making. You could argue that we are about 30 years behind because we've not been listening to marginalised societies who have been saying for years and years, look, there's a problem here. And we've not been learning from cultures that have devised ways to live and cope with climate crisis in their particular region. And that's purely by not having a seat at the table and not being listened to, not being included in the conversation. And I think it's a really good example of, if we translated that into all of our organisations, in our decision making and our policies, then we'd be better off for it. Off my soapbox.
what I think is important there is cultural intelligence and the level of which curiosity and awareness reaches populations we don't know much about them, and the way we lead, the way we manage that situation is very important in how it resolves. And when the most obvious thing I can think of, the conference that happened was there was no free access to the conference. And I don't want to bring it up because it's not really what I'm about, but not even thinking that there might be a person who needs free access to get in the door, even going to show how limited the seats are at a table.
Yeah.
And the intersectionality, but I'm all about intersectionality. I'm not about dividing people up into characteristics. It's not my bag. I think we are all intersectional beings that are very complex and very unique. But even by not having that, the voice that says, okay, who are we not including here? Who are we not getting to hear? Whose voice hasn't been heard? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves every day in our workplaces, in our workforces. We need to ask questions and we need to find solutions to them. And that's really how we've become more evolved, and that's how we become more innovative, I think, and includes leadership, drives innovation. It lifts people up where they need it, and gives people encouragement and support where they need it. And when we do that in a fair, equitable way, we get a result that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you both mentioned there a bit around kind of doing this stuff more consciously, right? I think we need to do that because, I often ask the question on when we're doing training around, anything related to inclusion. One of the common questions that I'll use just as a bit of kind of get people thinking about this stuff, is there's two questions. So have you ever felt excluded at work, and have you ever excluded someone? And there's always a gap. So people will admit to having excluded people at work when they really think about it, but there's always a gap whereby people feel they've been more excluded than they've excluded others. And that, unless I'm just getting the people who've, who aren't doing the excluding, which I guess might happen on an inclusion course, that might be the case. Some of this stuff is, it's unconscious, but also it's just not habit as well. It's not something that we do kind of without thinking. So the step-free access, for example, it's not a case no one sat around a table there and thought, I know what will be a good idea. Let's not have step-free access. But they've just not even thought about it. So how do we start to be more conscious about that?
But Matt, I think that this is what I'm most sad about, really, because to me, the step-free thing is basic.
Yeah.
That's an unsaid, for me, an unsaid thing. I work on mindset mostly, and I forget that mindset does come into mindset, but it's such a basic thing. I don't think I have to. I walk into an organisation and I think I don't have to cover this, and then I think like, okay, I do, because I myself know about it, and I'm not, I'm not above it that much. But but it actually shocks me that people still need to be reminded of that, of the basic elements of access. It shocks me into submission sometimes, how far there is to go in disability inclusion, and the steps that have to be taken there, sometimes in comparison to other areas. And I don't like to divide it up ever, but it does make me step back and think, whoa, how far do we have to go here to get from A to B, being where everyone has an equal voice, an equitable voice, and A being okay where we are now, and it's no end surprises me how that can be the case in this day and age, in this country. It shocks me. But yeah.
Otherwise, I would say that there's loads of stuff that shocks me. Simple thing. Like if I was going to think about another completely unrelated, and I wouldn't want to necessarily equate this to some of the more important things that we're talking about here, but like people shouldn't answer emails at midnight. People shouldn't answer their emails on a holiday, with their family. But they do. But they do. And that's one that kind of every time you hear it, and everyone says I shouldn't do that, but I'm still doing it, and all the rest of it. So it's just I'm interested in, I guess the real question is, how do you get to the point where you're embedding some of this stuff and it's real behavior change? Because it's obviously not easy, because if it were just a case that we shouldn't do these stupid things, then we wouldn't do them, but we do. So how can we as organizations set up, and as leaders and as individuals set up, so that it's more embedded into everything that we do, I guess?
I've answered a lot recently.
You've got any ideas on that? It's an easy question for you.
In terms of embedding, I think for us at Leicester, it's very much about making sure that we all have accountability and that we all recognise that it's everybody's responsibility. I think that what we're trying to do is enable our senior leaders to show their accountability. We've got an overall corporate plan, but what we really need to do is sort of distill that down into what that means for each of the different departments and divisions. that, you know, will have some really tangible, clear actions in it.
Yeah.
And that I think it's about making small incremental steps, tangible steps that you can work towards. And so that every inch counts almost. I think that's how we do it. It's a constant journey. It's continuous improvement. Because actually, I think there's a big expectation that we can change everything really quickly. And now I've not been in this sort of world of diversity and inclusion for very long, but it hasn't taken me very long to realise that it is about small incremental steps, or at least especially at the council. As long as we're all taking accountability, it can't just be somebody else's. It can't be equalities that do that work. It's got to be the leadership. And who says leadership is like that hierarchical thing? You know, thinking about distributed leadership where everybody has a role in it and should take responsibility. And I think that's partly it. I think the other thing is that we are really looking at our values and we're going to be getting the organisation to think about, well, what does that actually mean in practice? What do I need to do and live by in terms of the behaviours? But it's about the culture, isn't it? It's about creating that environment and creating a space and making sure it is important, like putting it up there as the front runner.
In addition to that, you need to have a collaborative space and recruitment bodies and reflecting that organisational bodies, reflecting leadership bodies, especially leadership. It is very important that people are part of the process. And by that I mean everyone is part of the creation or collaboration and co-creation in those values, in behaviours and in the actionable, right? But actually it goes through your values and what constitutes this value, what behaviours do we want to see in business, and what don't we? And it's all that psychological safety, interpersonal risk that we are allowed to feel, and dynamic in a team that encourages people to perform, that encourages people to challenge thought. That safety element, that psychological thing, it only happens when we feel like we are empowered at work, when we feel like we are supported, and that's it really challenge you. That's a supportive mood. Because even though we would challenge the status quo, or we would challenge the leader, quote unquote, the hierarchical bullshit, that forms in very hostile ways sometimes, it'll be counteract and quantitize that hierarchical performance, the chart of where people sit. If we can put that aside and work on the things that matter, because hierarchy doesn't matter really. It's a status game, according to me, I think, and I don't really play that game.
I think for me, the only,
Right.
it matters in a negative way to me in terms of where you've got hierarchy, you tend to have managers or leaders who aren't prepared to listen. Will only listen if you've got a certain grade or you've got a certain position. You could be talking through some of the most important plans, yet your voice isn't really heard because you're not important enough. And I have experienced that, sadly. I think, you know, in terms of leadership, it's about having a leader who is probably slightly more humble and more inviting of people's ideas and opinions. You know, those people that don't think they know it all already, that have still got something to learn, you know, and that have that mindset of I've got something to learn from everybody on a daily basis. And yeah, if we had more of that, it would be great.
But that psychological safety in hierarchy can clash, isn't it? Like, if you had psychological safety, that wouldn't happen as much.
Yeah, yeah. I think I have been part of teams where there hasn't been psychological safety. You know, I've been part of teams where there has been a requirement, a big requirement for creativity and innovation. And, you know, the teams have been diverse. You know, you've got diverse people at the table, which is partway there. But then what tends to happen is where you've got very strong-minded, creative people wanting to sort of get into coming up with brilliant solutions, yet when you challenge or, you know, you throw in ideas that perhaps aren't or haven't been tried and tested, it can be really difficult. There can be a lot of tension, can't there, and a lot of conflict, potential conflict. And if it's not, if it's not underpinned by that trust, and the challenges aren't aimed at people personally, or, you know, that they're not well intended, then that creates an issue, doesn't it?
And so this is something we haven't really touched on it yet, but it's so important. Like active engagement, how we engage, and that active process, and also let's not forget that diversity and inclusion are very different things. Diversity is a passive picture of anything. Inclusion is an active process, and that's a very different thing, different fish. And people often confuse them and think, oh well, I was at a conference years ago, and there was a woman on the panel on the stage with Ford, I don't know, it was a TED talk, and she came off stage, and I was having a chat with her, and she was so pleased at how diverse the stage was. I was like, are you serious? Well, it just wasn't how I saw in an inclusive space, least the audience. And I was like, wow, if you think this is like, if you think this is diverse, we've got a long way to go. If you're impressed by that, it's such a difficult thing to process when you're faced with a situation and you're told by a director of something that they're impressed by the debate. Oh God, it was just, I had to sort of bite my tongue and say something nice, but
we've been talking about this today, actually, but I mean, it's on the agenda, it's on our workforce plan, but bringing in young people into the organisation, you know, on entry to employment, so apprentices and kickstarts and graduates, and really, you know, attracting people from diverse backgrounds. And you know, Leicester City Council is a place of much diversity, as is the City of Leicester. But I think my big agenda then is, okay, so it's great to get people into the organisation, but what about the inclusive environment and the inclusive culture? Because that's what enables people to be at their best, and that's what encourages people to stay. And that, you know, that's my main focus in terms of leading the agenda from an OD perspective. Yeah. That's where you come in, Matt, to help us along the way with inclusive leadership programs. But I guess it's then looking at, okay, so what can we do to support and enable managers to be more inclusive, especially of younger people, but not just people who are young, obviously. But I mean, that's just one element with our entry to employment focus.
Yeah, just really quickly on that, if you don't mind, on that retention piece, I was chatting about this the other day, and absolutely, that is a key metric for inclusion, I think, is that, you know, organizations doing some great work in terms of attracting a more diverse set of candidates towards a job role, and, you know, writing the job description in such a way that it does that. And there seems to be quite a lot of work being done in that kind of area. And then when they join, it's like, best of luck. and you see the retention is poor, where people join an organisation, you've attracted that diverse bunch of candidates, but then they leave quite quickly.
This is where well-being comes into play, I think. This is where well-being and the whole, when you get someone in, like recruitment, and people seem to think there's a lot of weight on recruitment. Like, okay, there is, but I think more weight should be on progression and how you support and encourage and lead that person to success, to where they want to be and progress through, and where accountability of managers, they ought to be a section in managers' KPIs and competencies focused on how you manage your team this year. How you
totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I have actually typed those words into the workforce plan.
Yeah.
I think for us, one of the biggest things for me is that if a manager were having a really great personal development conversation with somebody, it would highlight their aspirations, it would highlight their potential, it would highlight what they're able to do, highlight where the blockers and the barriers are, and that, you know, that manager leader might be able to support with reducing some of those, whatever it is, or they can feed in upwards or wherever it needs to go to help somebody progress. It's definitely something we're focusing on that, because we know that it can be much better.
I'm working on something right now with a global, it's really exciting actually, with a global learning leadership and development and learning institute on a program developing cultural transformation as a program to society. All of it basically is about understanding preference and difference, and preference and need, and they are two very important parts of progress, and understanding that everyone has different preferences. Everyone, and it's as simple as saying, how do you prefer to communicate? What is your ideal communication method? If they say, oh, you know what, I'm really scared of a big team meeting, I don't like it, it's too much pressure. Okay, well, what suits you then? It's as simple as talking in those terms, and then accommodating that, seeing where it goes, and then if it doesn't work out, change it again. Being flexible, being more, and that linked in with developmental goals. So personal goals, like what do you want to happen in your career? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And making the preference difference and challenge, making that into part of a segmented goal-driven plan for that one person.
Yeah.
If you have that, you have your plan, you have your preference, your goals.
So tell me, what are people scared of? So I had an interesting conversation the other day. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, and I actually think that if there's one silver lining to the pandemic, and I don't want to repeat it if that's all right, then it's that it's got us thinking differently about things. And actually, one of the things that a lot of organizations are grappling with at the moment is return to work. And what do we go back to? Do we do hybrid? Do we do 2 days a week, 3 days a week? Is it completely home-based? And you come across a lot of people who, there's different preferences, as you've described there. I speak to a lot of people who say, I'm desperate to get back in the office and I want it to go back to normal. And I speak to a lot of people who are like, this has been great and I want to do the rest of my career from home, and I'm quite happy sitting in my back room. But when I speak to them, there's quite a lot where the organizations are, they'll have a line on it. You should be in 2 days a week or 3 days a week, or maybe there's a bit of discretion for the manager to say those things. And they don't like if someone pushes back on that, so if you say you got to be in 3 days a week and someone says, I really like working from home. So what are they scared of? Why are they doing that? And we need some consistency, right? But yeah, I'm not sure that's a very good question. Does that make sense?
It's an important one because it's something that's relevant now. It's so important. And there's so many factors involved, and there's not one factor involved. And I mean, you hate it. I'm aware I've been speaking a lot. I'm so sorry. Suzanne, speak on it.
When you say what are they scared of, I think that there's a manner of things in there, isn't there? I'm just looking at the comment from Emma about loss of power, the threat to your ability to be able to manage all sorts of different expectations all at once, and how do you cater for lots of people with different needs? How do you ensure that a team remains as inclusive as possible, and you maintain some kind of team ethos and cohesion and collaboration when you've got people maybe at home, in the office, out on in the field, as it's said. There's a threat to a person's ability to be able to manage all of that, isn't there? So I think that's something to be scared of. Also, have we got all of, I don't know, it's not very easy, is it, having a high performing team when it's dotted around? And I think having a high performing team, or a performing team even, when you are working remotely is a big challenge, one that you have to consciously lead through. It's doable, but yeah, I think there are just some things off the top of my head to be scared of.
I think that thinking about the challenges that life throws at us day to day, and managing a team remotely well, it's about, I think it's about seeing reality how it is, learning from reality, learning from our mistakes, accepting our mistakes, and rolling with them. So my mum was part of the OU in the early days of the OU, when it was just coming out. and it was novel. It was remote learning. It was not something that was seen, and it was not something that was seen as equatable to education, typical education. But what was magical about OU was that it did cater to that enormous thing that we're so afraid of, the remote bit.
Yeah.
The multiple levels you have to accommodate, you have to think about in advance. You have to think, like, how are these people going to learn? What are we going to do about accommodations? What can we do to make it personable? How can we approach that angle?
Yeah.
And when you learn, and this is about engagement, asking people what they think, what they want, how it works for them. If we ask that enough, we get our answers. So it's like being afraid of being open, being vulnerable as a manager, being not in charge of all the answers, and saying, I need your help here, guys. We need to work it out together.
I think at the beginning of the pandemic, Sarah, we were really good at that. I think most organisations would say that actually the style of leadership changed from very sort of task-based and, operational to, now I need to listen and find out how people are. And I can see where they live, and their children are popping up, or their partners in the background milling around, or whatever. All of a sudden it's more human and personable. And I had many conversations with managers who said, well, what, I feel like sometimes it gets close to having like counselling conversations with people, and the conversations were more about how people felt and about emotions and about what they needed to stay motivated. And there was a big shift. I think the danger with this is that, especially in local authority, where people feel stretched, really stretched, and they've got an operational role and a leadership role, and they feel that this stuff takes longer to do, and it takes more energy and effort, and it's not that perhaps they probably do want to do it, but they feel like they can't spend that much time. I don't know, I might be doing a whole load of people a disservice here. I do think it's a theme.
I think it's important to reassess the balance.
Yeah.
There. Like, if you are seeing that, and I certainly saw that in a role that I took on early in pandemic. And there are boundaries, expectations to set up. You have to set boundaries, you have to set expectations to manage that, the level at which you can counsel someone. But we cannot all be counselled. We haven't got the energy, the self-preservation, or reserves to do that. We haven't got that. And nor should we be expected to. That's why it's so important to set boundaries. But also signpost where we see needs for it, signpost elsewhere. And this is where wellbeing strategy comes in, which is often not there. Which is another issue, but it's part of inclusion leadership, part of inclusive culture is having a well-being strategy to be able to actively, knowledgeably, and trustfully be able to signpost onto to relieve that stress of the person who is the person translating, and have check-ins, but not be the sole person that manages all of that stress, because we will burn out that way. And so it's all about having a management system in place to buffer a buffer zone to be able to manage those situations and mindfully have those conversations without that pressure and that heavy heartedness and that need for a holiday every day. That shouldn't be on us all the time. And managing that in a well-thought way is how we embed, Matt, original question, embed, way off the track. Embed a structure that works.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's all incredibly interesting. Honestly, I could keep talking about it forever. But that's 45 minutes, would you believe, already? Absolutely whizzed by. I'll tell you what, if you won't mind, I just thought I'd finish with just a quick question, maybe a minute each or something like that. Just in terms of, we've talked about lots of broad things today. It's been, which is great. I had some questions which have completely gone out the window. Yeah, thanks for that. No, but I think we've just about covered everything that we were thinking about. But what about the future? I mean, my inkling is that, and I don't know whether I'm way off the mark here, but like I said, stuff like the pandemic and this more human-centered approach has given us all a bit of a kick up the backside when it comes to inclusion. And I see there's an opportunity, right? There's an opportunity to get some of this stuff to really stick. So what do you see for the future of inclusion in the workplace? Do you think it's moving in the right direction? And yeah, that's impossible to answer in a minute. But yeah, what do you see of the future?
I think it's definitely working in the right direction. Speaking from somebody who has a 13-year-old who is really savvy about this stuff. I think in the workplace we've got a long way to go. I think there are people of my generation who are going to need to look at their own preferences and their own beliefs and their own ability to engage with others, especially on an emotional level, in order to accommodate younger people coming in who are a lot more savvy. My daughter answered a school questionnaire really negatively, I have to say. It was all about diversity and inclusion, and I got a phone call from the teacher asking, is she okay? So yeah, they are going to have really big expectations. So future, I think the future workforce are going to have a lot bigger expectations from people in the organisation. That's my 1 minute, I think, maybe 2.
Just about. That'll do. Thanks, Susie. Sarah?
Well, I think we need to remain mindful that we still have ways to go. It's far from simplified, but I think it's become more of a complex all-in topic, which is great. It's less siphoned off now, which is fantastic. I think that's how it should have been in the off, but we still need to be mindful and engage and be curious about new ways of doing it. We cannot subscribe to one method. It's all about adjusting and change and molding and being flexible and being open to being told, actually, why not try it another way? And I think that's the only way we're going to evolve as an inclusive society, is by combining our thoughts, our expectations, I believe, and having the leadership and raising those, amplifying those who aren't heard, and making sure that people, all voices, get into the room.
Yeah,
that's it, I think, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's something that you both talked about which has really resonated with me, which is, some of this is going to be uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try, right? And that we shouldn't keep going with it and be brave with it as well. So yeah, well, thank you both so much for your time. Honestly, it's like fascinating stuff coming out there. I could keep talking about it for hours and hours and hours, but I'm sure you got jobs to do. So we'll kind of leave it there. We do have a few people on the line, so if you are free to kind of stick around for a few minutes. I wondered whether we did have any questions. So if anyone who's on the line has got any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat, or I should have said this at the start, really, shouldn't I? Feel free to drop it in the chat, or if you'd like to speak to us, you can ask a question. I can always remove it from the recording as well if you're worried about that. Unfortunately, we don't have it on LinkedIn Live, so I can't get any questions off that. But the LinkedIn Live doesn't have live captions, right, Sarah? So I just wanted to be more inclusive and just
but that's why I haven't done it before.
Sorry,
that's why I haven't done it before. That's why. Yeah, it's a legitimate thing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions come in.
Please do feel free, though. We don't want to be scary. We want to answer your questions if you have them.
Yeah.
I think. Anyone?
Okay. No worries.
Okay. We got some comments.
We did get some comments. Yeah, we've talked a little bit about these comments as we've gone through. A little bit. Yeah, we've talked about some of these comments as we've gone through. There was some good ones from Emma. Thanks, Emma. Kind of perfectly weaved into what you were talking about, which was ace. Okay, cool. Right, we'll leave it there then. Thank you both so much. I'm sure I'll see you again both soon. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks everybody else who joined today. And see you again soon.